Hello and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I would like to welcome Claire Smith of Beyond Animal, Beyond Impact and Beyond Investing. So welcome Claire, welcome to the show.
Thank you, great to be here.
Thanks. So can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yes, of course. So I've been in finance and investment all my career. I grew up in Hertfordshire, ironically in a farming family. My father had been in dairy farming, although he left that when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So I don't have much remembrance of that at all. I was growing up in Hertfordshire, then went to college in London, and then spent my period from, I guess, mid-20s to late 30s within banks and banks in the City of London. And then I moved into investment consulting, initially working for myself and then working for a company called Allborn. And I did that out of Geneva in Switzerland. In terms of when I became vegan and vegetarian, this actually occurred while I was still at home with my parents. And I became aware through a number of issues. One particularly important thing was going over to France and staying on a small holding there and seeing, whilst I was there, one chicken and one rabbit getting killed to be put on the table, which was disturbing. Not that I saw them being killed, but they disappeared from the small holding and they appeared on the table the next day. And also my father, because he had been in farming, he liked to keep up with the farming practices and watch a program called Farming Today, which was on the TV on the Sunday lunchtime. And it was in the late 70s, so I'm dating myself here, but essentially at that time, intensive farming practices were starting to come into the UK. And so I was watching them, he was watching them, and I was watching them, and I was more and more disgusted by what I was seeing. And that started me looking into vegetarianism initially and just avoiding eating animals. And I guess it was quite, there was one particular day where we were watching this program. I was like, this is so revolting. My mother came out of the kitchen with the joint of beef on a serving tray for Sunday lunch, and I basically said, I'm not eating that. And that was the day that I stopped eating meat. In terms of, and fish at the same time, I thought, well, they're all animals, they all deserve to live, kind of thing. The veganism actually came a little bit later, again through more education. I got involved with a group that was a raw vegan group and started to look into the nutritional aspects there. But it was also at the time where I had my daughter, and I was actually breastfeeding at the time. And so I was hearing about, the situation of cows within farms and taking away the calves, etc. At the same time that I was also feeding my own baby. And so I could understand the very powerful feelings of connection that one has with a baby when one is feeding, and thinking about the cows not being able to experience that with their own calves. And then ironically, at exactly the same time, or shortly after that, we discovered that my daughter was also lactose intolerant. Right. And so she, notwithstanding the wishes of my then partner, she couldn't actually even eat cow's products anyway, cow's milk. So, that really provoked me to become vegan and obviously look into all sorts of dairy alternatives for her. So so that was the backstory in terms of the veganism. And I guess going back to my career, what happened was after the period when I was during the period when I was with the investment company, I really felt that there was a sort of draw for me to move more into ethical investing. And I was obviously concerned about plastics, climate, workers' rights, everything. I'm a very sort of socially aware person, an environmentally aware person. But the thing that I guess had always really drawn me was the fact that I became vegetarian, then vegan, and I had been so throughout my entire life. And I felt, well, why is this missing from the investment sphere? Why is this not being considered at all? And so that basically, started me on the road to develop how I would go about it if I wanted to impose those kind of principles upon investment projects and upon investment funds, how I would go about that and what kind of projects I would invest in, and how I would look at the market and decide how something was vegan or not vegan.
So then at that time, you decided to create your own exchange traded fund, and you have now a vegan ticker, which is an index linked to that fund. So what's really interesting is that in that fund, you've managed to invest with companies such as Microsoft, Beyond Meat, Apple, Adobe, Verizon, Tesla. Can you tell me about the strategy you have behind looking at and choosing those funds from the S&P 500?
Yes, certainly. So what seemed to be a real gap in the market was a product that ordinary people could purchase that was essentially representing the stock market. So everybody in their pension plans and for their own savings, their sort of default is to just go directly to the stock market, buy an index fund. They're generally the cheapest options in the market. There's a variety of indexes, but there's some very standard market indexes which most people buy, and that is effectively the default for people that just want to put some money into the market and do a regular savings plan. It occurred to me that whereas there were some ESG type products and there were some products that had taken out fossil fuels, there were none that were taking into account these environmental aspects, plus also the issue of animal exploitation. And it was something that I myself had discovered when I took over a pension plan from when I'd been working in banks in the 1990s. I took over the running of that plan, and I found it really difficult to find any funds that I could feel comfortable to put money into. So that started me along the road of, okay, if I was designing this fund, how would I put this fund together? What would I be really keen to avoid in terms of exposures? Which stocks would be allowed, which stocks would not be allowed? And I started working with a couple of business partners on this. A gentleman called Larry Abel, who I'd known for some 15 years as a hedge fund manager in London, and another gentleman called Lee Coates, who actually has a deep experience in ethical screening, because he started the first ethical research company in the UK in the late 1980s. So he's very experienced in this area and does also work for a lot of animal charities in terms of drawing up their guidelines. So we've worked together on the guidelines, and essentially we have a set of guidelines around, I say guidelines, policies, rules really, around the avoidance of animal testing, avoidance of any type of animal product, or any rearing of animals, any killing of animals, any keeping of animals captive. So that includes obviously as well things like sport and entertainment, where an animal is being used for profit, either racing or put into a cage, for zoos, etc. And that element was something that was really missing from existing fund products. Other elements which are also considered in other fund products are things like fossil fuel, the use of fossil fuel for energy production, and also lending to fossil fuel companies. Other types of environmental aspects like plastics, single-use plastics particularly, and things around the human rights side, weapons and defense, and tobacco, obviously. But what we found really interestingly was that our animal exploitation screens actually kept us away from a lot of those companies anyway. So tobacco, you can basically look at as an animal testing exclusion rather than a specific tobacco exclusion. And things like the environmental practices of mines and the human rights records of mines, you can look at one or the other. It's generally an area that's best to be avoided. Where that got us to was to impose much bigger screens than most people are putting on the S&P 500, for example, and essentially something like 30 to 32% is actually coming out because of the animal exploitation side of things. And then about another 16% is coming out because of the other types of screens. So if you're looking at something which is not taking out animal exploitation, you're keeping in that 30-odd%, which we're taking out, which is actually quite a large amount of the market, a startlingly bad number from where I'm thinking about it. to think that 30% of the companies in the stock market, their business models are relying on the exploitation of animals, that's really not a pretty picture.
Yeah. Do you think you'll be taking it a step further and also looking at even the ones that you've chosen and the choices that they're making for materials or even byproducts of animals? So if, for example, they're a retailer and they're selling leather goods, for example, or cases or whatever, bags.
They are actually already excluded. We are excluding the retail element as well as the production element.
Okay,
so we're looking all the way through the supply chain to the distribution and to the retail. And if there are products such as that, if it's a clothing company, then they are relying on animal products. It's a decent amount of what they're doing. We do have some guidelines in terms of very peripheral products. So we do allow in some things where it's such a tiny fraction of what the company is doing that it's, we call it de minimis, but we are looking at the amount of money that they could feasibly be obtaining from that. It caused us to take out things like hotels, obviously restaurants, obviously the idea is catering and so much of food in restaurants is meat. But it caused us to take out hotels as well, because our research revealed that actually, a significant portion of hotel revenues is actually from their catering options. And then you have to look at the catering options and say, well, how much of the catering revenues is going to be coming from the meat items on the menu, and that actually caused them to drop out of the index as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to, and for transparency, I know you have a list of all your stocks that you share, which is great on the ones that you filtered, but even for the ones that have been removed, to tell them the reasons why and say, there is a change that you can make, for the positive, for the environment, if it's changing a few things on the menu that you have in the hotel, for example.
Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in the last couple of months, we have actually started engagement and we've published that engagement. So there are five or six companies which we have highlighted aspects of their business activities which they could remove.
Yeah.
And that involves the use of leather. There are two media companies, electronics companies, one Verizon, one Apple.
Yeah.
And they actually have some leather in their stores in the form of some, covers for phones, etc.
Straps on
yes, well, the straps, exactly. And they could remove that. Now, in the context of huge companies like Apple and Verizon, these are very, they're minuscule in terms of revenues. But it's something that also means it's something that they could remove, and it would make no difference to their business model. They would still be, big, highly profitable companies.
Yeah.
We're also targeting car manufacturers. We know that Tesla did go vegan, actually after some pressure from some of their shareholders who were also owners of cars, that they preferred to have only vegan products offered in the cars. And over time, they have gone vegan. I think they went vegan with the car seats, and then they were able to replace the steering wheel. And we see that other companies should be doing the same. So we're targeting Ford and GM on that issue as well. And then on the flip side, Starbucks has shown a lot of interest in going more plant-based. Yeah, and so they are not in our index at the moment, so they're not in the portfolio. But we consider that, given the interest that they're showing in terms of moving more towards plant milk, after they did an environmental survey of where their highest carbon emissions were in their supply chain, they found it was in dairy. So they're moving towards plant milk. And then in China, recently, there were news that they were adding plant-based meats to the menu. And we would like to encourage them to move swifter in that direction. And if they were, then obviously they could become eligible for us to buy as a company in the ETF. So we're gently encouraging. Gently. I guess we're strongly encouraging companies to that, but we can only do a certain at a time. And so we released this engagement program, and we are public about it. The engagements are on a platform called Your Stake, which any shareholder can join and tell the owners of the platform, tell the people managing the platform how many shares they have in these companies, and add their shares to our campaign.
Okay. And
So
that's open to other types of funds as well. Is this
oh
a,
yeah,
oh,
yes,
it's like,
it's an open platform.
it's an open
And
platform.
yeah, so the current number of shares is our shares plus anybody else that have joined in, and we've actually also joined in on some other campaigns as well, where we are happy to pledge our shares towards other people's campaigns that
Right.
are, around more kind of environmental or social types of engagement.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're public, and we would love it if other people were to pledge their shares and help us persuade these companies to stop these damaging practices.
One of the things that I remember quite well from your website is a video that you've got on Beyond Investing. And one of the slides in there is the amount of proportion of land usage from animals to humans to wild animals. Actually, could you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, actually, there's quite a lot of different data in that film, and there is some data around land usage, which I speak about on a later slide. The one that you're referring to, I think, is the picture is on the title slide, and that is like this really big cow,
Yes.
and a smaller guy,
Yeah.
and then a really tiny rhinoceros in the corner. And the figures, if I recall them correctly, are 60% for the cow.
Yes.
Some 36% for the humans and 4% for the wild animals. And that is actually the zoo mass. So it's land mammals, their weight, let's say, in terms of, of each type. So let's categorize all domesticated animals as the cow, 60%, right. All humans, add all their weights together, 36%. And then all the wild mammals, it's the 4% in the corner. I actually looked into some other research a little while back, and essentially over the last century, those numbers have shifted dramatically.
Yeah.
With a huge increase in the number of humans, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
Even since when I was born, I think it's gone up by at least, it's gone up by at least 100%. And a massive increase in the number of animals, because over that period, not only do you have more people, but you have more people eating more meat. The standard American diet actually has something like 25% of meat and dairy products, animal products in it, which is a dramatic increase. So this is how you get these huge skews, and obviously the massive reduction in the number of wild animals. I'm struggling to remember where it came from, but I mean the size of it now versus where it was, let's say, even 40 years ago, I think it's gone down by like 5 times. Let's say it was 20% down to 4%. It's a massive, massive amount. And that does have an impact on resources, because the human beings are eating, but if they are creating animals to eat, the animals also need to eat and be fed, be watered. What are they eating? Increasingly, they're not grazing. There's not enough grazing land for all of those animals. They're being fed the high protein products, the soy, the corn, which is grown in monoculture farms. So there's this massive agrochemicals issue as well, deforestation, in order to grow the soy and the corn, which is then transported all around the world. So you get a high transport footprint. So yes, the damage is absolutely enormous. And I think one of the statistics that I highlighted in that presentation is that the animals that we eat actually eat some 5 to 6 times as much food as we eat.
It's huge quantities.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is what that picture is really designed to demonstrate, is the huge weight on the earth in terms of resources that these animals are causing.
Right. And thinking about Beyond Impact now, which is your investment arm into startups, it'll be great to know about the range of companies that you invested in and your actual investment strategy towards those companies and new ones that you're looking for.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I see it as very complementary to what I'm doing in ETF. The ETF is taking away from the companies that are doing damaging activities, and we would prefer that they were not providing those products at all, frankly. But if those companies are not providing those products, what are the new products that need to be created? What are the alternative products? People have got used to eating in a certain way. I always say nobody goes from a steak well done or rare to a lentil curry. You know, it involves a change in how you eat, what you want to eat, how you make it. It's too much of a mind shift for people. So a lot of the alternatives are about creating sort of facsimiles of animal products. And people always ask vegans, oh, why do you want these facsimiles of animal products? Well, a lot of people do like eating the animal products. We've got used to eating them over, you know, millennia. And we still like the use cases, let's say, of mixing them into sauces or you know, the bun, the hamburger in the bun, etc. It's very convenient. So the vegan products do need to fit into the way that people are used to eating. And that's kind of vegan convenience foods, I call them. So it's like plant milk, or it's meatless farm burgers, or it's Perfect World ice cream. It's mayonnaise made by Algama. They're using algae to create that mayonnaise. The Jack and Rye jackfruit, which is creating a pepperoni, which can go on the top of pizza. So all of these different use cases, if you just take, people have got used to thinking about veganism in terms of, oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't eat that. What does that leave me with? And it's not an appealing thing, frankly. You know, the number, frankly, in my lifetime, the number of meals that I've had where I've got to a restaurant, maybe it's been up in the mountains somewhere, very limited menu, chips and salad. How many vegans can, you know, put the hand up and say, how many meals of chips and salad have they had? Too many. And this is why it's not been appealing. So the availability of these alternatives is very important. Some of the things that I put in my portfolio, some of the investments have been in companies that are somewhat more biotech-led, which are really creating very precise, not just alternatives, but recreating essentially the molecules that are in animal products. And some of this is coming through precision fermentation, which is a process whereby yeast is engineered to create those molecules. It's something that has been happening for some period of time. Most cheese now is created by manufacturing a rennet. Rennet always used to, actually, cheese was never a vegetarian product in the past, because it required this extract from a cow's stomach called rennet. So a lot of people thought that cheese was vegetarian, but it actually wasn't. And then cheese actually became vegetarian to the extent that it wasn't using that cow's rennet because of this yeast expression, whereby they were able to engineer this protein, which, you know, creates a hard cheese, which causes the, you know, the sort of change in the cheese from milk, you know, going from milk to a hard block of cheese. So there's an analogy there, and essentially the companies that I've invested in, like Geltor, like Clara Foods, are creating things like collagen. This is Geltor, which then obviously can be in itself fermented to become gelatin, which goes into many products. Currently comes mainly from pigs and from fish. The pig aspect of it makes it not kosher, not halal either, so it causes problems with some religious restrictions. And then Clara is focusing on some enzymes from pigs and also egg white proteins, and precisely synthesizing the proteins within egg whites, which means that at scale, what they can basically do is then put the exact same thing down through industrial processes. It's not like some of the egg alternatives, which are great as they are. They're created from plant-based materials, which behave in a similar way to, let's say, a scrambled egg. But in order to really crack the large production of, let's say, cakes, you know, where massive amounts of eggs are used, you really need something that they can just put down exactly the same process and use in exactly the same way, that there's not going to be any adaptation of the recipe needed. They'll get exactly the same result. And that's something that I find really exciting about what they're doing.
Yeah, me too. I think it's super interesting if suddenly they can make cake products that are suddenly plant-based, and it opens up, you know, to a whole new audience, but also existing people who didn't actually need to know. It's just changed the ingredients.
But this is it. I prefer the word vegan, which is obviously avoiding, to the extent practically possible, you know, to as far as you possibly can, any animal input. I prefer that to plant-based, because these fermented products are not plant-based, because there's no plant that grew that then you're taking from, you're taking something from the plant in order to create the product. It's a different process.
Different process.
But I think the key element from where I'm standing is that it's animal free.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think vegan as a word describes much better. So I tend to rather look at them. And there was also, a discussion recently about, well, what do you do with algae and fungi? Because they're not actually plants. They're different kinds of they're in a different genus of biology.
Yeah.
Not the same plant, with roots and leaves, etc. But they're a different format of biological life, but they're not animals. Do we lump them in with plant-based? And this is where I feel that the plant-based, it can get very confusing.
Yeah. And are you when you're thinking about the new types of companies to invest in, is there, like a group or sector that you're looking to get into that you don't have as part of your portfolio yet?
I think there's still white space in the food area, and I'm thinking particularly about some of the in the cold area of food as opposed to hot area of food. So I think there's still some things to do with things like tuna and cold meats, like luncheon meat type things. I noticed that Green Monday recently put out a spam in Asia, but actually I think they're more cooking it as also in meals as well.
Right.
So I think that, but there's still tons to do in terms of choice and in terms of the raw materials. And this is why I was interested in the jackfruit being used as a meat alternative, because I think that so many of the meat alternatives are either based very heavily, they're based heavily on things like soy or the gluten, the seitan type things, or pea protein is now being very heavily used. And the other one is obviously the mycoprotein. And all of these things are great in their own way, but I think that the more choice there is, the better. And the jackfruit ends up with a meat taste, but with being much lighter, not as heavy and not as chewy as a lot of these things. So I think that there's different there's different ways to make them, which make these meat alternatives, which will lead to a wider variety of results, which is great for choice. And I think that, as I said, the kind of luncheon meat aspect of it, and for sandwiches, etc., is huge. When everybody goes back to work, the standard thing to do is to just pop out to Pret or whatever and get a sandwich. And I think that there does need to be more in terms of these kind of fillings. The other area which is really fascinating to me at the moment is the materials sector. I would like to do some investment in the materials sector, because I see that as being very closely allied, obviously, to the meat production, in that most leather is coming from the same cows that are killed for meat. And so there do need to be alternatives in that space. I don't want it to be purely synthetic leather made from petrochemicals. There's very little point in me having an ETF which is excluding fossil fuels and then being perfectly happy with leather from that is polyurethane or whatever. So I'm pretty keen to see some plant-based leather, especially if a lot of them are actually zero waste. So they're using the excess or the byproducts of food processing and then turning them into a material. And that would be ideal, because that also deals with a lot of climate aspects and, as well, if we can go more zero waste and find other uses rather than just letting it go into landfills and then it produces methane through decomposition.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it's really good that you're looking into those areas too next. So you've also built now like a social network for vegans called Beyond Animal. So it'd be great to know about that, but also where you see the USPs against traditional social networks, and within that social network being part of a group. So as you sort of siloed experience that you've created now.
Yes, exactly. So just looking at it from the perspective of the social media aspect, the community platform, and we're calling it the humanity platform because it's a humane community. And if you just kind of squish those two words together, you get the word humanity, which is just great, because it's all about, everything that I'm doing is about, the being for humanity, both for mankind, but also being humane, which is another version, another definition of the word humanity is about how you treat other people.
Yes.
and other species. So yes, so that platform is about bringing the community of people who are within who are vegans, but also who are accelerating or attempting to build this vegan economy. So this is something I won't say that activists miss, but it's something. There's obviously been a big emphasis on activism in terms of persuasion, but everybody needs to realize that the vast majority of animal exploitation happens because of a commercial activity. It occurs because an animal is being seen as an object which is worth something in terms of not itself as a being, as a living being, but in terms of all the bits and pieces that can be used from that animal. And so that shift that's an economy, an entire economy, and about 30%, as I said, and about 15% of that was purely in animal products, that needs to shift. And so there needs to be a transition that takes place into all of these alternatives. What does that require? It requires people, it requires businesses, it requires products, it requires money. And so that economy needs to be supported by being people who are involved in that economy, being able to find each other easily, interact with each other, collaborate with each other. And also part of the platform is going to be about sourcing funding for these businesses as well. So you could also consider it to be something a little bit like a virtual accelerator. So an accelerator has access to funding. It has its own funding. It maybe has a network of people who also will come in and co-invest on deals, but it also has a group of experts who can also support the businesses. So I would like to see all the businesses come to the platform, the experts. We already have many experts on the platform in various aspects of business management, NPD, new product development, development of products, consulting within the plant-based area, people who have great connections with distributors, buyers in retail, in food service, people who are experts in things like exporting from one country to another and what the regulations are if you want to sell into, for example, Canada. And so the whole community can benefit by being on this platform and being able to find each other and collaborate together. I mean, a lot of activists are very in favor of the entities like Facebook and LinkedIn. And I think it's great that people are being made more aware on these platforms of the issues involved in the use of animals through undercover videos. And we republish, especially our own social media is republishing a lot of this material, because we think it's important that people on generic platforms should know more. But in terms of collaboration, these niche networks around a specific thematic, which can bring the people together that are interested in that, so that they can share within their own, their zone of interest, I think is could be very, very helpful in terms of pushing not just the movement forward in terms of collaboration between activists and people who are generally interested, but particularly with these businesses, because these businesses do need a hell of a lot of support. So many are startups run by fairly young people. They don't necessarily all have the business acumen. They haven't been in like big food businesses for the last 20 years. There's so much enthusiasm, but they do need so much support, and they do need funding in order to get off the ground, and also in terms of scaling as well. Scaling is an enormous issue at the moment, because there is a need for new ingredients. There's a need for new manufacturing facilities. There's a need, obviously, for the retailers and the food service to understand how they use these new products, where they put them on the shelves, how they're labeled. If it's in food service, how you incorporate them in a menu in a way that's appealing. So there's so much to be done, and if we were all together, all working together on this, it would make things move a hell of a lot faster.
Yeah, that's great. So can you tell me where you see the vision of that product going? You mentioned about the micro funding element. It'd be great to know a little bit more about that and how that would work for these startups.
Well, yes, I think that the standard means by which companies are funded is extremely fragmented and also very slow. so if I can say, let's say if you're a startup and you want to go to places for funding, you have to do a whole element of research in terms of where to go for this funding. You have to go, oh, well, is there people in my entourage? Maybe you go through your list of friends, you get a little bit of money from there. Then it's like, oh, well, do I then go to angel networks? Where do I go to find angel networks? Is there anybody who's specializing in this area? Do I go to a global network that's specializing, or do I go to a local network that's going to have local businessmen who can help me with my company? There's so many, choices along the way. And then venture capital as well. How do I access venture capital? You go to any venture capitalist and they say, oh, well, we're getting hundreds of pitches every year. And if they are not specific, they're getting, how does the plant-based entrepreneur really get the attention that they merit? So, part of it is about sort of creating this pipeline and saying, okay, we're here, come to us, register for fundraising. And we're creating essentially, well, initially a list, but basically a categorized list around the types of funding opportunities that there are in this area. And then we have on the other side investors completing a survey around the kind of deals that they want to do. And we are accepting anybody to fill in the survey. Obviously, we're very keenly aware of regulation, and that for certain types of deals, you can only go to certain types of investors. So investors are having to classify themselves in terms of what type of investor they are, what size of deal they can do. And we'll be reaching out then to those investors to the extent that obviously the deals match with their ability to get involved. And we're very happy to have professionals come onto the platform as well and help to lead these deals, but also make the ability to get involved in these deals open to a wider audience. I mentioned that things were very slow. Essentially, even if you have experience in the space, it can take a year to raise a fund. So you have to be going, you yourself, let alone the startups having to walk around and try and find the venture capitalists and the angel investors that might help them. The venture funds themselves don't have an automatic, pool of capital. They have to go around and, with their pitch book to the large investors and family offices and institutions and say, oh, and I'm trying to raise a fund and this is what it's going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And, and that takes a year to raise a fund. And then it's only then that they start to invest. Now, I don't know whether you're aware, but the amount of methane that's going into the atmosphere because of all these animals is enormous. And there's also methane coming from fracking as well. We won't go into that. But we don't have years and years and years to wait for the capital markets in the way that they're currently designed, with the level of fragmentation of impact investors, of classical investors, of the venture capital funds, all to kind of get together, sovereign wealth, to kind of decide, oh yeah, maybe we should put some money into this space, and how do we put some money, and then do the due diligence on funds and take their time to decide. It needs to happen a lot faster. And so this is where technology can come in. 10 years ago, you wanted a taxi, you'd have to go to, maybe you'd go online or you'd look in Yellow Pages or whatever, and you'd call and the taxi would arrive, or you'd have to book it for a certain time. And now we all have Uber or Lyft or whatever, because it's on our phone and it's instantaneous. Now, I see the financial markets and particularly this issue of funding as being another area where we need that kind of disruption in order that money can get to the right places that much more quickly. Yeah. And it's not because people don't want to invest in this space. I have people contacting me because I'm kind of somewhat well known for doing it. I have people contacting me all the time saying, how do I put money into vegan companies? Can I put money in a fund? Can I find vegan companies to invest in? And I've had to sort of say, oh, well, I could point you here, I could point you there, depending on where you are. And this was another reason of thinking, well, no, let's make this kind of global portal. So I can say, yes, come to our platform if you're interested, fill in the survey. We generate the pipeline through the fundraiser registration. And then, yes, come here and we'll find a way for you to put money into vegan companies.
So hopefully we're going to see a lot faster progress with these innovations that these companies will start to create now as a result of this.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a real explosion, because I see the innovation of the companies coming through them, getting resources, but also being able to, through the platform, connect with other companies that can be business partners to them, and so accelerate the growth of all of the companies that are on the platform.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a sort of, if we build it, will they come kind of situation. But I think that's the case for every platform. It needs a certain amount of traction. The traction is increasing. We're working with some of the experts, like I said, that are helping companies find manufacturing facilities, etc., so that they're doing webinars. And through these kind of events, we're drawing people onto the platform, where not only do they, see a presentation from somebody about something which is useful to them, but they can also ask questions and then connect with the other people on the platform, after the event. Through our continuing development of the platform, it's getting more and more functional, more and more useful and easy to use. We feel very confident that it can really support these businesses going forward.
Yeah. And where do you see your long-term vision of all your Beyond businesses that you have at the moment in the next few years?
I mean, I see them all kind of, continuing in parallel, with the ETF.
Yeah.
We have one ETF, the US Vegan Climate Index.
Yeah.
Was the first index. We have created already a European, internally, we've created a European index.
Yeah.
And we could put that out into the market, get that being calculated. And there could be a European version of the ETF, there could be an Asian version, or we could go direct to a global version. And then that makes, the large cap of the area of the market, which is the core allocation for all investors, have the largest amount of money in the largest caps, obviously, because that's where the liquidity is. So that's that area sort of sorted. We've got thematic portfolios, which are looking at the small to mid cap stocks and parsing through them to find those stocks which are making vegan products, they're in the agriculture area or in food or clothing, cosmetics, whatever. We found a whole group of stocks that are sort of, hidden amongst the smallest stocks in the market. But we put that together in a portfolio, and we'd be very happy to put that out as a fund as well. Our process can be applied to bond markets. So you could veganize bond portfolios. Right. You could even veganize fixed income with metrics around a country and how clean and green they are effectively, not just on fossil fuels, but also their use of animals and their how they are controlling things like deforestation, let's say. So you could figure out how interesting that might be in terms of a fixed income portfolio. So there's much more that can be done in that area. Obviously, all of these new companies could be financed. So I really see this issue of capital flows being so important to this transition. I always say you've got consumers, citizens, and capital. So you've got consumers buying the products, which is great, but the products need to be there on the shelves in order for them to buy. You've got citizens saying, we're not happy about, caged chickens. We're not happy about gestation rates. So even people who are not vegan are really upset about factory farms. And that's something, especially with the coronavirus, which we've managed to get all the way to here without mentioning, and the meat packing plants. This is something that people are really, very focused on at the moment. And the disruption in the supply chain basically is about a broken business model. This is why the ETF actually has been outperforming, is because so many of the companies that we are not investing in actually do have broken business models. They are not sustainable. And something like coronavirus is really just bringing that out into the open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just hope that in 5 years' time, I see really an entirely different picture of far more of these companies having grown. We're seeing, some of the big market leaders, the Beyond Meat, the Impossibles, Just, Green Monday, the work that David Young is doing in Hong Kong, bringing out these products that are getting into far more retailers, opening up the market for other people. And so I see Beyond Animal and the other, Beyond Impact and Beyond Investing as being part of that. and supporting the capital flows that need to happen in order to get to that reality.
Great, fantastic. So, yeah, I wish you the best of luck with all your endeavors, and yeah, thank you for coming on the show. And yeah, if you want to learn more about other businesses, please do subscribe and comment if you can. But for the moment, thank you very much, Claire.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Annette.
Take care. Bye-bye.